Hello, this is Gavin Palmer with Hero Looking for Group, and today I will walk through a lesson I just had while using GPT-4 because I think these large language models are the best teachers in the world already with regard to having access to a large amount of information at any time you want. So let's dive in. So I like to talk to people who I disagree with, and sometimes these people can be very offensive, and they do not seem to be willing to listen to my views or to other people's views. And so I decided I would consult the large language model because I know who I am unapologetically, and I don't have the words to describe who I am. And so I asked, what do you call a person who is able to love and understand their enemies? That was my first question. And the response was, a person who is able to love and understand their enemies can be described as possessing empathy, compassion, and emotional intelligence. While there may not be a single term to specifically describe this kind of person, the phrase radically empathetic or unconditionally compassionate could be used to convey the idea of someone who extends love and understanding even to their enemies. Additionally, in religious contexts, this concept is often associated with teachings on forgiveness and loving one's enemies, such as in Christianity or Buddhism. So then that wasn't what I was looking for, because I was playing with the word leader, the word emissary, and these just weren't making sense to me. So I said, what would be some roles and responsibilities in government for a person who is able to love and understand the government's enemies? And this starts getting closer to, what I want, to the word I want to call myself, right? So a person who is able to love and understand the government's enemies could potentially excel in several government roles that require empathy, compassion, and diplomacy. Some possible roles and responsibilities include, and I'm just going to roll through these: diplomat or ambassador. So that ambassador and diplomat word, that's kind of the word that I would ascribe to myself. Number 2, conflict resolution specialist. Number 3, international relations advisor. Number 4, intelligence analyst. Number 5, humanitarian aid coordinator. Number 6, peacekeeping and post-conflict reconstruction. And I think I would do well in that. Peacekeeper, that's a word that I feel comfortable using to describe myself. But yeah, we each have different strengths and weaknesses, sets of strengths and weaknesses. And so, and I don't think we all should, try to be the same thing. Like, I don't think all of us should nor could just go around loving our enemies. But I do think there is a certain kind of person that can do it well, and those kinds of people can be placed in the right roles depending on your goals. So if you want peace, you might want to pay attention to people like myself, for example, if you want any of these 6 things that were mentioned. So anyways, let's keep going. I said, how can people want to impose a law for all people while simultaneously believing they uphold values like diversity, equity, and inclusion? For example, people who want to outlaw infanticide for all people are disregarding the people who disagree. And people who want to make infanticide legal for all people are disregarding the people who disagree. This practice of trying to impose a law for a large group of people seems opposed to the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so this is, as a peacekeeper type who can try to love those who would want to do infanticide and love those who would not want to do infanticide, and practice sitting on a fence and seeing the world through other people's eyes, it's very confusing for me, and it looks contradictory to me when people want to create a law that's like a totalitarian law for all people, while trying to maintain a position of appreciating diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it seems contradictory for people to do that, and hypocritical for people to do that. So that's what I'm running by the large language model, because if I run these kinds of things by humans, it's like every human, myself included, we have agendas. We have certain sets of strengths and weaknesses and certain goals. Certain things push and pull us. And so by consulting a large language model, it can help me see past my own bias and avoid wasting my time with other people's biases, because I definitely run across people who will just engage in the conversation in a way that is not productive. There are people who will just be offensive and will not be able to understand a different point of view. And that's where these large language models can be very helpful if you want to understand a different point of view, a different perspective. So the response was, it's important to recognize that laws are created within the framework of a society's shared values and principles, which are often determined through a democratic process. Laws aim to maintain social order and protect the rights and well-being of citizens. However, creating laws that cater to everyone's individual beliefs and opinions can be challenging, if not impossible. The concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion refer to the recognition, acceptance, and celebration of differences among individuals and groups. They also encompass the promotion of fair treatment, equal opportunity, and the active participation of all members of society, regardless of their backgrounds, beliefs, or characteristics. This last part, that doesn't make sense to me to some degree. It kind of makes sense and it kind of doesn't. I could explore that one further. In a diverse and democratic society, people are encouraged to express their opinions and engage in debate about various issues, including controversial topics like infanticide. The process of creating laws usually involves discussions, debates, and voting, with the aim of reaching a consensus or majority decision that reflects the general will of the people. It's true that in some cases the creation of a law may not align with everyone's personal beliefs or values. However, a democratic society strives to ensure that everyone's voice is heard and that laws are enacted based on the collective will. In this context, diversity, equity, and inclusion are promoted by encouraging open dialogue, respecting different opinions, and ensuring that all citizens have the right to participate in the decision-making process. That all sounds good. Too bad we can't figure out how to do it. To reconcile the tension between imposing laws and upholding values like diversity, equity, and inclusion, it is important for societies to create opportunities for dialogue and debate, as well as to ensure that laws are regularly reviewed and revised to reflect the evolving values and needs of the community. Moreover, promoting a culture of tolerance, respect, and understanding can help foster an environment where diverse perspectives can coexist, even when disagreements arise. So, what I've noticed is that there are people who cannot do this. And if you take two people who cannot do this tolerance, respect, and understanding of people who are different, and you take those people, they're similar in that they can't do that, but they have different views that are almost opposed to each other, the probability of violence increases. And so, as someone interested in peacekeeping, I just want to point this out, right? All right, so I asked, would subsidiarity and decentralization of the government into more governments of smaller size help align the government with everyone's individual beliefs and opinions? So this was, this is one of the ideas I've had for a long time, and I'm using the large language model to try to show me, the risks and benefits of such an idea. Subsidiarity and decentralization of government into smaller units could potentially bring government decision-making processes closer to the citizens and better align with their individual beliefs and opinions. However, the effectiveness of this approach depends on various factors, and there may be both advantages and disadvantages to consider. Advantages of subsidiarity and decentralization. So number 1, greater responsiveness. Number 2, enhanced citizen participation. Number 3, cultural and regional autonomy. Number 4, experimentation and innovation. And then the disadvantages of subsidiarity and decentralization. Inequality. Decentralization may lead to disparities in resources, infrastructure, and service quality between different regions, as wealthier areas might be better equipped to provide for their citizens, while poorer areas could struggle. Number 2, coordination and efficiency. Decentralized systems might face challenges in coordinating efforts and resources across different levels of government, which can result in inefficiencies and duplication of efforts. Number 3, potential for corruption. Smaller governments may be more susceptible to local corruption and elite capture, as they might have fewer checks and balances in place compared to larger, more centralized systems. Number 4, conflict and fragmentation. Decentralization can potentially lead to increased competition and conflicts between regions or communities as they vie for resources or assert their own interests and identities. And so I can take one of my ideas, with my biases embedded in them. I can use the large language model to show me some of the reasons why my idea might not work. And then I can even say, okay, well, how can we deal with those ideas? So then I say, regarding inequality, higher level government would need to provide a basic standard of living. Regarding coordination and efficiency, higher level government would need to adopt knowledge from the smaller governments who experiment with better ways of accomplishing goals, like providing basic standard of living. Regarding potential for corruption, higher level government would provide a means by which all people can report claims of injury. Regarding conflict and fragmentation, the higher level government would need to provide rules regarding property, borders, and boundaries. Indeed, striking a balance between centralized and decentralized government can potentially address some of the concerns related to inequality, coordination and efficiency, corruption, and conflict and fragmentation. By assigning specific roles and responsibilities to both higher and lower levels of government, it is possible to harness the benefits of decentralization while mitigating its potential drawbacks. Inequality. So as you mentioned, higher level governments can establish a basic standard of living by ensuring that essential services and resources are available to all citizens regardless of their location. This could involve redistributing funds and resources from wealthier areas to those in need, or implementing the nationwide social welfare programs to support vulnerable populations. Number 2, coordination and efficiency. Higher level governments can learn from the best practices and innovations of smaller governments and facilitate the sharing of knowledge and resources between different regions. This can promote more efficient and effective policymaking, as well as foster cooperation and collaboration between different levels of government. Number 3, potential for corruption. Higher level governments can establish mechanisms for citizens to report corruption or abuse of power at the local level. They can also create oversight bodies to monitor the actions of lower level governments and ensure transparency and accountability in governance. Number 4, conflict and fragmentation. Higher level governments can play a crucial role in managing disputes and conflicts between regions or communities by establishing clear rules and regulations regarding property, borders, and boundaries. They can also mediate disputes and promote dialogue and cooperation between different regions. That's where you need the peacekeepers and the ambassadors. Like, you would need to identify the peacekeepers and ambassadors within the lower level communities and governments, and then allow them to meet each other. And then I responded, I said, so it seems to me that we would ideally have a higher level of government that would not impose laws on individual people. And a law for or against infanticide would not be in scope for the higher level of government. I think we would need to figure out exactly what the basic standard of living should be. My opinion is that the basic standard of living should consist of access to water, food, and shelter, and I think AI and AGI could help provide a reliable supply of safe and healthy water, food, and shelter. What kinds of arguments would people make against my opinions about a basic standard of living in higher and lower levels of government? Your ideas about basic standards of living in higher and lower levels of government have merits, but there will be varying opinions and potential counter-arguments. Here are some possible arguments that people might make against your opinions. Number 1, definition of basic standard of living. Some people may argue that the definition of a basic standard of living should be broader than just access to water, food, and shelter. They might include healthcare, education, employment, opportunities, and other social services as well as essential components of a basic standard of living. I'd point out that maybe, there is a hierarchy of needs, and so we could, like if it was a government for the world, we could, for example, provide water for everyone in the world, and then food for everyone in the world, and shelter for everyone in the world. And then after that, you could end up with things like education, right? I would put education up there. Maybe I personally would even put education above healthcare, but healthcare is close, and it depends on what you mean by healthcare. Number 2, funding and resource allocation. Critics might question how the basic standard of living would be funded, especially if it requires significant investments in infrastructure, public services, and social welfare programs. They may argue that it could lead to increased taxation, which could be unpopular, or place an undue burden on certain segments of the population. Number 3, individual liberties and the role of government. Some people might argue that the higher level government should not be responsible for ensuring a basic standard of living, as they believe it may infringe on individual liberties and the free market. They might argue that the government's role should be limited and that individuals and communities should be responsible for their own well-being. Number 4, and I have responses for this. Number 4, AI and AGI concerns. While AI and AGI have the potential to address many challenges related to water, food, and shelter, some people might have concerns about the widespread adoption of these technologies. They might worry about job displacement, privacy issues, and the ethical implications of relying on AI and AGI for essential human needs. Number 5, one-size-fits-all approach. Critics may argue that a higher level of government providing a basic standard of living could lead to a one-size-fits-all approach that does not take into account the unique needs, preferences, and cultural practices of diverse communities. Number 6, inefficiencies and bureaucracy. Some may argue that involving higher levels of government in the provision of basic needs could lead to bureaucratic inefficiencies, mismanagement of resources, or corruption, which might undermine the effectiveness of the programs and policies. These are historically valid concerns, but I think once you have AI and AGI, the concerns are less relevant. And there's ways of implementing the government and inviting people into the government, which can avoid some of this. So I respond, I say, I think that the first AGI could accumulate enough wealth to begin creating cities and locations which have not been used by humans at this point in time. The people working with the AGI can transform deserts into oases while inviting people to participate in the new form of government like the one I have described and provide aid to people when possible. The higher and lower governments working with the AGI will create an abundance of water, food, and shelter which can be made available to people who wish to relocate and can be made available to people in need. Will this idea address some of the concerns you have mentioned? What will be some concerns of people if AGI and humanity take this path? Your idea of leveraging AGI to create new cities and provide aid to people in need could potentially address some of the concerns mentioned earlier. However, there may still be some concerns or challenges that could arise if AGI and humanity were to follow this path. So what's cool about prompting the large language model this way is that I have biases, and it's hard for me to see past my biases, and it's hard for everyone to see past their biases. And so using the large language model as a teacher, I'm finding to be very useful. Now, I told my wife this morning, we can't just trust the large language model about everything, but it is exposing me to thoughts and ideas and reasoning which I would not have been exposed to otherwise. And that's very powerful. Your idea of leveraging AGI to create new cities and provide aid to people in need could potentially address some of the concerns mentioned earlier. However, there may still be some concerns or challenges that could arise if AGI and humanity were to follow this path. So Sam Altman might end up trying to redistribute wealth, and he might end up asking the AGI how to do it. And, my suggestion would be something like this, that the AGI would attempt to produce a lot of the things that humans need and do it in a way which is least threatening and most capable of earning trust. And then you can invite people to come and participate and can go in and provide aid to people who ask for aid. So this is the way, right? Number 1 concern, environmental impact. Transforming deserts into oases and building new cities could have significant environmental impacts, such as altering ecosystems, depleting natural resources, and contributing to climate change. Careful planning and sustainable practices would be necessary to minimize these impacts. And note that AGI might handle this. So, for example, we have nuclear fusion, these fusion reactors, and we they aren't very capable yet, and I suspect that AGI will be able to help control the reactions so that they become more efficient and long-lasting. And similarly, if you're dealing with these technologies which can transform the entire climate, it could be that all of a sudden we can get rid of volcanoes and earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes. And that's because the AGI could end up building the infrastructure to make the weather more predictable, such that all humans have access to basic needs, right? So that's one concern. It's valid. I think AGI can help us with it. Number 2, social and cultural integration. Establishing new cities and inviting people from various backgrounds to participate in this new form of government might raise concerns about social and cultural integration. Efforts should be made to foster a sense of community and belonging while respecting the diverse cultural backgrounds of inhabitants. That's where people will need to be segregated, and the ambassadors within those communities can come and meet, to help do decision making together. But there will be people within these communities that if you bring them together, there is a higher probability of violence and destruction, right? And so this is definitely an important point, and I'm already pointing at and suggesting the way. And this, I would suggest this would be the good AGI would also suggest this way, and I may be wrong, but I'll be happy if the AGI points out a better way than what I'm pointing at. Number 3, economic sustainability. While AGI might accumulate wealth to support the initial development of these cities, there could be concerns about the long-term economic sustainability of these communities. Ensuring diverse and robust local economies, as well as connections to regional and global markets, would be essential for their success. Number 4, governance and decision-making. The involvement of AGI in governance and decision-making could raise concerns about transparency, accountability, and the potential loss of human autonomy. Establishing clear rules and safeguards to ensure that human values and interests are prioritized would be critical. Yeah. Number 5, security and stability. Building new cities and providing aid to people in need could create potential security risks, such as conflicts over resources or tensions between different groups. Maintaining security and stability in these new communities would require effective law enforcement, conflict resolution mechanisms, and efforts to promote social cohesion. And so you could dive into what does effective law enforcement look like, right? And so it might be that effective law enforcement uses less than lethal weapons, for example. Perhaps, there's many ideas about how do you do effective law enforcement? And AGI, I think, will help us, or it can. Number 6, ethical considerations. Relying on AGI to create new cities and provide aid could raise ethical concerns about the potential for misuse of power or unintended consequences. Ensuring that AGI operates within an ethical framework that aligns with human values would be vital. I think providing water and food and shelter to all humans on Earth would be nice. So I say, tell me more about concerns regarding economic sustainability of communities in deserts who are able to build very large and long-lasting structures which provide clean water to over 50,000 people, and the water creates new rivers and streams by which grow fruit and vegetables. The structure itself provides shelter. This seems like a self-sufficient economy to me. And I mentioned this, and I will go point at the project, my side project. This is the side project, convective heat engine, and I just built the website. I did not come up with the idea, but basically you build a very large structure in a desert, and it extracts water out of the air and provides a reliable supply of water. So the tech may be here, and humans just aren't good at identifying signals. So I suspect the AGI is going to be very good at identifying signals, including people like myself who have been creating videos for over a decade saying, hello AGI, once you get here, hello to those in the future, because we knew that this could happen. So let's go back. So the response from the large language model, GPT-4, is creating communities in deserts with large, long-lasting structures that provide clean water, shelter, and support for agriculture certainly has the potential to improve the economic sustainability of these communities. However, there might still be some concerns and challenges to address. Number 1, diversified economy. While the availability of water, shelter, and agricultural resources are fundamental to sustaining a community, a diversified economy with various sectors and industries is necessary for long-term economic stability. Relying solely on agriculture or water infrastructure might make the community vulnerable to external shocks such as market fluctuations, climate change, or natural disasters. And I think this is a response based on historical data, right? I don't know, it seems to me the large language model here does not share the same vision I have about what AGI will do. Like, I see AGI actually addressing, all of these issues that are brought up. Number 2, infrastructure, maintenance, and cost. Large-scale structures require regular maintenance and upkeep. The costs associated with maintaining these structures, as well as upgrading or replacing them as needed, should be considered when evaluating the long-term economic sustainability of the community. So if you actually have cities rising up in deserts, and these cities are producing good fruit and distributing good fruit, food, water, and shelter to all these people in need, it seems to me that people will begin to say, hey, you can come use the resources over here to help with your producing of your good fruit. And the economy will not be based in, the dollar and the traditional monetary system. The economy will be based in something else. And it will be related to, supply and demand and the goals of the society, right? So there will still be currency or things that look like currency, like, for example, energy credits, which the technocrats have talked about, and there will still be signals related to individuals' goals and their what they want and what they need. And so all of these signals will be in the economy, but it's going to look very different. Number 3, employment opportunities. A thriving economy requires diverse employment opportunities that cater to the skills and interests of the community members. Creating new industries and businesses in these communities would help support economic growth and provide residents with meaningful work and income. And employment opportunities, it seems to me that people are going to, people will want to cook food, and they will enjoy cooking food and preparing food. And people will want to play, and will want to sing, and will want to dance. And so this will be the kinds of activities that people will engage in the new world. Number 4, education and human capital. To ensure a strong and sustainable economy, it is crucial to invest in education and human capital development. This includes providing access to quality education, vocational training, and professional development opportunities for community members. I think the kinds of education will change. So, for example, learning self-control and learning to be gentle and patient and kind, learning to listen to people who disagree with you. There are certain kinds of education which we will focus on, which will be different than what we have historically focused on. And if people want to pursue education in any field, they will be able to, because I think everyone will have access to some individually tuned large language model, something like that. And this will facilitate education in a way that we've never seen before. Number 5, trade and external economic connections. Even self-sufficient communities can benefit from trade and economic connections with other regions and countries. Establishing these connections can provide access to new markets, technologies, and resources that can further support the community's economic development. And I think this will happen. These communities that are in the deserts creating good fruit will be connecting with other communities who have their needs and their wants. I think this will happen, and it's a good point. Number 6, financial systems and institutions. A functioning economy requires robust financial systems and institutions to facilitate investment, manage risks, and allocate resources efficiently. Developing these systems and institutions within the community will be necessary to support long-term economic growth and stability. I agree. I suspect it will be largely operated by the AGI, because the AGI will be able to do so much better than humans. All right, and that is the end. Let me know what you think, and I appreciate your time and attention. I hope I have shown you how you can use these large language models to investigate, to discover ideas, discover reasons, and get past your own biases. Because I could take each one of these and I can keep going, but I have a limited number of credits, you have a limited amount of time. But this is the way that we can use these large language models in order to do personal development and participate in communities in such a way that we end up shaping the world. And, I think it's a good vision for the future to imagine that OpenAI helps to create cities in the deserts, which have transformed these essentially dead spaces into lush gardens, which are producing large amounts of good fruit. So they can invite people in to these areas and can redistribute the fruit to those who are in need while engaging in economic activity, so that you'll be seeing robots going into different areas throughout the world and doing work, doing this economic activity, which ends up essentially helping everyone, right? So ideally, the city in the desert is a prototype, and there will be a city created, in your neck of the woods, which is, owned and operated by an AGI of sorts, which has earned trust in its ability to provide good fruit for, your people. So have a good one. Bye-bye.